He was the guy who argued for Trump to be, and it's his job, you know, he's hired, whatever. But you can just say no to jobs. To anybody who says, like, the cop lives matter, blue lives matter, all that shit. It's a job, dog. You can just choose to fucking leave. Your problem with racism, our problem with racism, our problem with fascism, the only way you're going to be happy is if we stop existing. If black people, if women that you don't like, if you know, the people that aren't allowed, that you would say uppity, I wouldn't say uppity, but you would say these people aren't allowed. That's your successful goal. My successful goal is you shut the fuck up and everybody live their lives. You can do that and it won't do any harm to you. You don't have to go to your cop job. You don't have to go to your little inspector general job. You can just sit at fucking home and do anything else. You choose to do this. You choose to come out here. Every single day you choose to do it, so I will choose to vilify you.
And a cascade of such universal injunctions followed. Since January 20th, district courts have now issued 40 universal injunctions against the federal government, including 35 from the same 5 judicial districts. This is a bipartisan problem that has now spanned the last 5 presidential administrations. Universal injunctions exceed the judicial power granted in Article 3, which exists only to address the injury to the complaining party. They transgress the traditional bounds of equitable authority, and they create a host of practical problems. Such injunctions prevent the percolation of novel and difficult legal questions.
Turn the volume down a little bit. Just let me know if I got to turn it up.
They encourage rampant forum shopping. They require judges to make rushed,
rampant forum shopping. Remember that these people, because they did it in the Trump v. United States one, they will argue one thing in one case and then the exact opposite in another. Do you think the Trump campaign actually has any issue with shopping around to find a court that is favorable to them? Fuck no. That is what they do.
High-stakes, low-information decisions. They circumvent Rule 23 by offering all the benefits but none of the burdens of class certification. They operate asymmetrically, forcing the government to win everywhere while the plaintiffs can win anywhere. They invert the ordinary hierarchy of appellate review. They create the ongoing risk of conflicting judgments. They increase the pressures on this court's emergency docket. They create what Justice Powell described as repeated and essentially head-on confrontations between
Justice Powell. Who's Justice Powell?
the life-tenured and representative branches of government. And they disrupt the Constitution's careful balancing of the separation of powers. I welcome the court's questions.
Careful balance of separation of powers. Remember, these are the people who argued. So in the Trump case, anybody who didn't watch these oral arguments for the Trump case, quick little refresher. This guy argued that because, remember, this asshole argued for you didn't impeach him, so you can't convict him criminally. That was his argument. That was his thing. And then he went and argued that you wouldn't be able to impeach him until, like, it set up a situation where impeachment being necessary meant there was some immunity cooked in. You know, if you were in the last month of your presidency and they couldn't get, you know, the House and the Senate wouldn't be able to get it done in time, you could do anything you wanted and it would just be immune because you hadn't been impeached yet. It created its own problems. He argued one way and then the other way, and then was willing to argue, oh, well, the impeachment can't happen because the impeachment would be incorrect. Or that, so argued that if the court had an issue with what they were what he was asking for, and they granted it to him anyway, it would be solved later on down the line because there would be that impeachment. And then he said the impeachment wasn't proper as well. So it's that type of thing. So saying, oh, well, you got, like, lying to a Supreme Court justice. They don't like that. If I go to a judge and I lie to a judge, I could end up in jail. Like, if I just outright fucking lie, say shit that's just wrong or piss them off, I could go to jail. Not these people. These people are allowed to look at the highest court in the land and just blatantly lie. Say one thing out of one mouth and then one thing out of another. I think they even got called out directly by the justices. Oh, you said this was a form of relief, but you admit that this isn't an actual form of relief. You know we couldn't actually do this in time. This person is a flip-flopper, and the lack of principle in the argument is apparent. It's important to know when this guy goes. So if he says, oh, separation of powers here, they don't give a fuck about any of that, and they're willing to stomp all over that in the next breath if they need to win this. They will say anything. They will do anything.
General Sauer, these universal injunctions.
By the way, Clarence Thomas is a fucking bitch, and I'm not scared to say it.
Injunctions, as you say, have proliferated over the last 3 decades or so. Would you discuss, though, the origins of universal injunctions? In particular, I'm interested in sort of historical analogs or the historical pedigree, particularly the Bill of Peace that was proffered by respondents.
Yes, Justice Thomas, as you, I think, first pointed out in your separate opinion in Trump against Hawaii, the Bill of Peace is something very distinct from a universal injunction. So the Bill of
So this is Clarence Thomas. Let's go. Over somebody, you like that one? Never forget that Clarence Thomas has done this before. So Clarence Thomas, when he was writing his dissenting opinion, so they're referencing something that I haven't read now. But just off hearing it, off rip, it sounds exactly like something that Clarence Thomas does. So when he's writing a dissenting opinion or when he's adding something to an opinion or something like that, he is known to write in a bunch of random stuff at the bottom, like he did for the Jack Smith report, to say that the way that investigator was appointed was wrong, and they didn't have the ability to do so, even though there was precedent, even though there was something. And then Eileen Cannon was able to use that because it was an unrelated Supreme Court case, but at the very bottom of his opinion, it says, oh, by the way, I think it's really weird how we appoint some special investigator, blah, blah, blah. And then Eileen Cannon was like, oh, well, the Supreme Court said it, and then did it. So there was coordination there. Like there is a, hey, we need this message, include this in there, and then Eileen Cannon does it. Do I know it? Allegedly, whatever I got to say to fuck off. There was coordination there. Clarence Thomas puts in shit that helps out the bad guys, that helps out the Eileen Cannons who are trying to get Trump away from the Mar-a-Lago charges, who are trying to circumvent justice. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. They are trying to circumvent justice, and Clarence Thomas is one of these people. He is a justice trying to circumvent justice. That's what this is. He writes in things, or this part seems like a bit of a helping out the bad guy, throwing up a softball to introduce an argument that hadn't been made yet, but you can hear John Sauer jump right on it, super excited. Oh yeah, like you wrote in this. So I haven't read that bit of Clarence Thomas writing, but I assume it's similar to the Jack Smith stuff, where it has no real standing, but the bad people can use it to say, oh, well, look, this says it, blah, blah, blah. Clarence Thomas is a plight on our society.
Peace involved a resolution of a small, discrete set of claims of a small, discrete group, and even more fundamentally, it was binding on the members of that class and those represented by the class. So it's much more analogous to a modern class action under Rule 23. And in fact, as we've argued in other cases, and as this court has described in opinions like Ortiz, the Bill of Peace evolved into, and is directly developed into, so to speak, the modern class action that has all the same features of a Bill of Peace. So in the words of Chief Judge Sutton in the Sixth Circuit, the Bill of Peace, it was a domesticated animal that looks nothing like the dragon of a universal injunction.
I'm sorry. Here, there's a discrete identified group on one issue.
I love Sonia Sotomayor. Overstimulated mama. Give me some shit. We're going to do a write-up, so we have some notes on this. This is the Birthright. Oh, I'm clicked right over here. I don't know why.
This
Birthright Citizenship Oral Arguments. So we can take some notes.
citizenship
So
mean, are you born in the territory of the United States, or does it mean...
Oh, for John Sauer. Is that what you're saying? That's fucking hilarious.
And even more fundamentally, it was binding on the members of that class and
Bruh, overstimulated mama with a banger of a comment.
those represented by the class. So it's much more analogous
Straight up Marge Simpson. I'm gonna let it play. Holy shit.
to a modern class action under Rule 23. And in fact, as we've argued in other cases, and as this court has described in opinions like Ortiz, the Bill of Peace evolved into, and is directly developed into, so to speak, the modern class action that has all the same features of a Bill of Peace. So in the words of Chief Judge Sutton in the Sixth Circuit, the Bill of Peace, it was a domesticated animal that looks nothing like the dragon of a universal injunction.
I'm sorry. Here...
And this is where I love Sotomayor. If you ever get a chance to read her stuff, if you ever get a chance to, she is the best. Homie!
Here, there's a discrete identified group on one issue. Does citizenship mean, are you born in the territory of the United States, or does it mean, are you loyal to someone else, which is your claim, or are your parents loyal to someone else? So that's no different than what happened in a Bill of Peace. the United States is bigger, so it extends more broadly, but it's still an identifiable group on a discrete, singular question.
So in a way, it just took all the equivocation, all the bullshit or equating, but I don't fucking know how to use words. Took all the bullshit that he was saying and just like, nope, this is why it's wrong. It is a discrete group. You chose to enact it on a giant one. You can't then argue that the group is too big for them to have a defense. It's fucking insane.
Your Honor, I'd say three things in response to that. First of all, our primary contention is that the citizenship clause related to the children of former slaves, not to illegal aliens who weren't even present as a discrete class at that time. But more fundamentally here, as to the issue of the Bill of Peace, there are critical differences. The Bill of Peace was a binding judgment that would bind absent class members. Here we have the asymmetry.
Well, here, class actions don't bind anyone who opts out, so class actions are not like bills of peace.
Oh, she just gets right down to it. She knows the differences. She's read the inside. I love Sotomayor. If you ever get a chance to read her writing, her dissenting opinion on Trump v. United States is phenomenal. If you ever get a chance, this is a very serious person. I feel like there are a lot of positions of our government, there are a lot of positions on this Supreme Court where not serious people, these are goofballs, are in these positions. So you see this stupid shit. This is not one of them. This is a very serious person.
I would think that a Rule 23b2 class action, which would be the relevant analog here, would be one that would be binding on absent class members and would not have the same notice and opt-out procedures. And more fundamentally, that sort of argument that there's a commonality here among all the people who purport to be affected by this is the sort of argument that's made in class certification.
So can I ask you a question? Your theory here is arguing that Article 3 and principles of equity both prohibit federal courts from issuing universal injunctions. Do I have your argument correct?
We argue both of those.
You argue both of
bases,
those?
Yeah.
If that's true, that means even the Supreme Court doesn't have that power.
The Supreme Court would have the authority to issue binding precedent nationwide.
But we couldn't enforce it against universally, is your argument.
If there was a decision that violated the precedent of the court, then the affected plaintiffs could get a separate judgment.
And that means you're talking about the hundreds and thousands of people who weren't part of the judgment of the court. They would all have to file individual actions?
Oh my God, just getting to it. Okay, so if we did it this way, we the Supreme Court wouldn't be able to do this. And he's like, yeah, well, you'd be able to get around it and do this thing. And it's like, okay, so hundreds of thousands of people. So one of the arguments that he made at the beginning, this is why I'm so glad I talked about Trump in the United States. This is why I'm so glad I talked about, we're going to call him Marge now. John Sauer is Marge now. Thank you, overstimulated mama. We're going to talk about Marge. Even though Marge is a whole hell of a lot cooler. He's got the Marge voice, He argued at the very beginning of this, one of the first things out of his mouth, his intro statement was the burden being put on the courts, specifically this court, but the burden being put on the courts from having the thing set up the way he doesn't want to, the burden would be too high, forces too many emergency cases, puts the burden on the courts too much. This situation, now Sotomayor asks, get right to the heart of it. So you're asking us to have hundreds of thousands for all these people that wouldn't be included in this? The situation that you've set up would lead to hundreds of thousands of cases, then more for is that what you're saying? Did you lie to us before?
Not necessarily.
Or a class action.
A class action would be
Isn't that makes no sense whatsoever.
Respectfully, we believe that.
Well, what was the purpose of the Bill of Peace if not to settle a legal question finally? And if even the Supreme Court doesn't have that right and must invite hundreds of thousands of lawsuits, what are we buying into?
If a set of claims satisfies the rigorous criteria of Rule 23, Rule 23 is the modern analog of a Bill of Peace. We have something very different here.
No, but we don't, because the argument here is that the president is violating an not just one, but by my count, 4 established Supreme Court precedents. We have the one ARC case.
Oh, so good, comes with receipts, doesn't let him spring up, doesn't get that Marge voice going, doesn't let her get on a roll, stops John in his tracks. Hey, shut the fuck up. What you just said is wrong, and here's why. Here's the real set of issues that it blocks. And what is he saying, really? The point that she's getting at is a very important one. If other courts, if you can disrespect other courts this way, if you can ignore other courts because of you not liking the decisions, do you think that they... ask yourself this question. Anyone who's decently honest that watches my show, if you asked yourself, really honestly, would the Republicans be pushing back in this way if all the judges' decisions had gone their way? If all the same decisions, all the same, whatever, but had reached the same, conclusion, if it would have just gone their way, would they give a fuck? Nope. Judges are dope. Judges are dope. Biden was trying to take away our guns and then judge stopped it. Fucking dope. Cool. Let's keep judges. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. You think they'd care? No, absolutely not. It's just because it went against them a couple times because what they're doing is unconstitutional, and the people who are responsible for determining what is constitutional or not and giving some judgment are telling you that it's not. They want to throw out the judges. Not their plan, the judges.
Where we said fealty to a foreign sovereign doesn't defeat your entitlement, your parents' fealty to a foreign sovereign doesn't defeat your entitlement to citizenship as a child. We have another case where we said that even if your parents are here illegally, if you're born here, you're a citizen. We have yet another case that says even if your parents came here and were stopped at the border, but you were born in our territory, you're still a citizen. And we have another case that says even if your parents secured citizenship illegally, you're still a citizen. So as far as I see it, this order violates 4 Supreme Court precedents.
Yeah,
and you are claiming that not just the Supreme Court, that both the Supreme Court and no lower court can stop an executive from universally from violating those holdings by this court.
We are not claiming that because we're conceding that there could be an inappropriate case.
Only a class. Only.
Can I hear the rest of his answer?
A Rule 23 class action. And then the more fundamental point as to all those Supreme Court decisions you referred to.
So what do we do temporarily?
Temporarily, the court may issue, the lower courts may issue injunctions that remediate the injuries to the plaintiffs that appear before them. Lower courts, in appropriate cases, may certify class action.
So when a new president orders that because there's so much gun violence going on in the country, and he comes in and he says, I have the right to take away the guns from everyone.
Let's go, Sotomayor, hitting with bangers. Bruh, I have never felt so represented as when I hear like some of the very few smart people that there are in these offices, in these positions, start fucking talking. Yes, asking the good questions. How would you feel if this was 2A? How would you feel?
Then people, and he sends out the military to seize everyone's guns. We and the courts have to sit back and wait until every named plaintiff gets, or every plaintiff whose gun is taken comes into court.
In appropriate cases, courts have certified class actions on an emergency basis. We found at least 4 cases in recent years where that was done. But more fundamentally, we profoundly disagree with the characterization of the merits. This is now fully briefed in the Ninth Circuit in case number 25-807, where we describe how that characterization of the holding of Wong Kim Ark and the other decisions is profoundly incorrect. And
You still have
Counsel, could I ask you about it?
Oh, and you can hear the other justices are trying to save him because Sotomayor is grilling him so hard. One, she was interrupted by another justice. Oh, I'd like to hear his answer. It was dog shit. You just heard it. It was a bunch of dog shit, telling the court they had no idea what they were fucking doing. And now they're coming in again to save him. Yes, overstimulated. Oh, FC number 3. Thank you so much. It has been a great show today. I agree. If it were 2A, their heads would spin off their show. So true. So true. Well, and what gets me is, like, in a perfect, like, not a perfect world, I guess, in like a perfectly fair world, a Democrat, say the elections go off, like, I don't believe they will. I think they're going to try and steal elections like they did in 2020. But say the elections go off without a hitch. Democrats come back, a Democratic president comes in and use the same argument, the exact same words, the exact same argument, and they put 2A in there. These people's heads might just explode. They might spin off. They might just literally blow up because it would be the same thing. You sat by and you watched people's citizenship being taken away. What right do you think you have to your gun over someone's citizenship? It's insane. And if you just use these same arguments, they'd be like, oh, well, this doesn't make any sense. All of their nuance would come back. All of their ability to understand things would come back. They'd actually be able to think and breathe like the rest of us. But no. Now they stick their heads in the sand. The maggot sticks their head in the sand and just pretends this shit isn't happening.
About a different type of case that has broader impact than on the particular claimant, like a claimant who's alleging that the districting in a particular case has resulted in racial discrimination against him or her based on how the district is drawn. Now, a judicial decision about that one plaintiff would implicate the redistricting throughout the whole case, throughout the whole state. How does your theory address that situation?
That would be what you might call an indivisible remedy, where what the court is doing there by, for example, redrawing the district lines is, as this court said in Gill against Whitford, the only way to remediate the injury of voting in an unconstitutionally drawn district. That is similar to abatement of a public nuisance or, for example, in the school desegregation cases, where remediating the injury to the plaintiff before the court necessarily has collateral consequences to many others. Certain environmental cases might have a similar thing. For example, you stop the local plant from pouring, water pollution into the water. That benefits the plaintiff. It happens to benefit a bunch of other people. Now, that's very different than what we have in these universal injunctions, where it is a divisible remedy. I mean, I point to the holding of the District of Massachusetts in this case, looking at the individual plaintiffs. That court said, well, obviously, I don't have to give a universal injunction to protect individuals other than the individual plaintiffs. They are given complete relief by an injunction that tells federal officials only to treat their children as citizens.
I guess the question is, why does the law require that? I mean, I appreciate that a court could, in a divisible remedy kind of case, narrow in to the plaintiff, but you seem to be suggesting that Article 3 or Rule 23 or something requires that, and I guess I don't really understand it.
If I may offer two responses to that. In the Article 3 context, that is the principle announced in Worth against Selden, announced in Gill against Whitford, and Lewis against Casey, where this court has said again and again, what we do in the Article 3 context is grant remedies that are tailored to remove the injury to the complaining plaintiff. Sometimes they have even very broad collateral consequences, but in the Article 3 context, what the court has not done, and every time it's focused on this in National Treasuries Union, Employees Union, in the purpose.
God, ever since you said that, overstimulated mama, it's Marge Simpson now. Like, I can't. Like, it's...
I don't see why then the divisible remedies or indivisible remedies is an argument. I mean, if Article 3